Good evening, Avacal. I am Maester Nadelhide, and I welcome you to part one of the Laurels portion of the Ask the Peers series. First off, I would like to begin by acknowledging that Avacal is in Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, 10, and 11 territories, the Métis Nation, and the Nunavut settlement area. We acknowledge all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I would like to thank the Order of Chivalry for kicking off this series of Q&A panels. We put out a call for people to submit questions to be answered. Like the Shiv, we realized that the Laurel has a number of communication problems within the kingdom, and this is our effort to begin the dialogue. No, this is just the beginning of the process. Although today each question will only be answered by 2 Laurels, all of the questions were presented to the Laurels Council as a whole and discussed with the entire group. Although the answers will be those of the panelists, they were informed and advised by the entire group. The Laurels received a number of similar questions, so some questions have been combined. It was not our intent to avoid answering any questions. It was done for clarity and brevity on our panel. If you do not hear your exact question answered, I hope you do hear the answer nonetheless. If we miscombined your questions or feel we didn't answer it sufficiently or clearly, please reach out to myself, another member of the Order of the Laurel, or a third party to present your question to the Laurel. We will do our best to keep those lines of communication open, and as I said, this is only the beginning. With that, I would like to introduce you to our moderator tonight. The Order of the Laurel is pleased to have Baron Fjall Ljodersen with us to present your questions. And go ahead, Fjall.
Thank you, Maester Nadelhide. Again, I thank you for that introduction. I am a Baron of the Court of Avacal. I served as Mergenwood Baron for 4 years, and I am also a member of the Order of the Pelican. Very proud to be involved in this today. I believe that it will break ground for new opportunities and better conversations with everyone. The first thing I'll do is introduce the panelists. I believe they will be introducing themselves as well the first time they talk. Am I correct? Well, you will be now. We have 5 panelists. Sav, Joffrey's daughter. Her pronouns are she and her. Katerina Tkach, she is she and her. Francesco Moretti, pronouns of he and him. Philippe de Saint-Denis, he and him. And Mistress Dorothy Bolton, she and her. With that, I'm going to get into the questions. You can introduce yourself as you before you answer the first question. How does the Order of Laurels of Avacal see themselves moving forward to promote diversity, both in their order and in the kingdom in general? And to answer that first will be Francesco.
So, hi, I'm Francesco. Today, some of you may know me on other occasions as Monna Caterina. And on those occasions, my pronouns are she and her. So I'm going to answer this first question. Now, we as Laurels can't promote diversity within our own order until we have more diversity within the society itself. So I'm going to speak to how I am personally working to promote diversity in this society. And for that, I want to talk about how I speak to newcomers. So when I'm speaking to newcomers, it's often at demos. And then the first question then is usually about fighting, although that doesn't have anything to do with arts and sciences, because that's usually what brings people into demos. So I almost always start with the fact that women and men both participate in the fighting, and it isn't broken out by gender or weight classes. All of the men and women fight together in the same combat field. And then the second thing I tend to mention is that the society is for exploring cultures across the world from before 1600, just so that people don't think that it's Eurocentric. And then the last question that I seem to get quite a lot these days from people who are interested in joining is about, you know, can we have gender fluid personas? What if my partner and I both want to join and we're both the same gender? And so I try to make sure that they know that that is definitely accepted.
Thank you very much. Our next panelist to answer the question will be Mistress Dorothy.
Hello, I'm Mistress Dorothy of Mergen Wood. I do a great deal of research in textiles and social sciences, both for late period Northern Europe and for Han era Japan. And so for me, one of the ways that I think we can most expand our diversity is by encouraging people to explore research outside of Europe, as Francesco said, not the narrow Eurocentric model that the SCA started at 50 years ago. We've grown so much since then. And it's very important for me to encourage respectful research of cultures that are not one's own, and particularly cultures that are not traditionally white. So for example, my standards for researching Japanese culture and clothing are far more rigid for myself, so that we are ensuring that not only are we encouraging a non-Eurocentric worldview of the vast diversity the SCA has to offer in its scope, but also making sure that it is a respectful environment in which people, particularly people of color, feel that they can bring their own voices, bring their own history, and be taken seriously and respected, particularly by those of us who are enjoying the discovery of those cultures we did not grow up in. As far as diversity on the council, we always strive to, in all of our discussions, not to discriminate based on gender, never on sexuality. I'm gay myself, and I've never felt unwelcome in the council for any of those reasons. I really appreciate the support that I've received. I am kind of a baby Laurel. I've only been at it for 2 years. And so I am learning a lot more about the inner workings of the council, and I found that the focus of the discussion on the arts really helps us to move forward and to increase the diversity of what is really quite a small little council right now.
Thank you, Mistress Dorothy. The next question. When the Order of the Laurel has determined someone has met the necessary level of skill and knowledge in their field of study, what are the last questions or criteria that the Order asks or feels must be met before the individual is to be elevated? And the first answer on that will be Katerina.
Hi, I'm Katerina Kach. I have a Eastern European persona, specifically Ukrainian. I was laureled in 2015 for my work in Pisanki and for my work in hemp processing, so turning hemp stalks into fiber. So to answer this question, we are guided extensively by Kapora as far as our candidates go. So I'm actually going to quote Kapora, as boring as that is. So the candidate must have attained a standard of excellence in skill and knowledge equal to his or her prospective peers in some area of the arts and sciences. They must have applied this skill and knowledge for the instruction of members and service to the kingdom to an extent above and beyond what normally would be expected of a member of the society. once you're a member, we expect you to have courteous and chivalric conduct, to respect the crown and uphold the laws of the kingdom and corpora, and to enrich the kingdom by sharing your knowledge and skills, and to achieve and to advise the crown on advancement of candidates. So within that, the thing to pull out is we are looking for teachers. We're looking for someone we're comfortable with being an ambassador to the rest of the society. And can we send a new person to the candidate in a way that we feel comfortable for them to share their skill with the person? One of the other things that we really look for, because we're a very small council in a very new kingdom, a reasonably new kingdom, is that we need community builders. So we do look for that as well. Have you built community around you by sharing your knowledge? So, and I think that's all I have to say on that topic.
That was quite a bit. Thank you.
Sorry.
Second answer on the same question, Mistress Dorothy. You have to unmute, Dorothy.
Forgive me. I'd like to add that the additional questions of peer-like qualities and community building, those are not always the last questions asked. Sometimes people are excelling in the peer-like qualities, in the teaching, in the accessibility to newcomers. And one of the last questions that we wind up discussing is, has their research reached the level of excellence prevalent in the kingdom? Because we do watch for those who are building arts and science community, in addition to your individual skills. So the Laurels Council will be aware of what you are doing to build community and to demonstrate your chivalry and your welcoming, even before your research is reaching a certain arbitrary level of excellence in your area. So there are many things that bring a candidate to that final decision to extend the invitation to be put on vigil. But know that we do see all the work that goes into building our arts and science community. And for me, being from a smaller barony, I am so inspired and so conscious of looking out for the people who are doing that building in the shires and on King's Land and in the more remote or the smaller communities within our kingdom.
Thank you very much. The next question, what can or will the Laurels do about their peers who no longer meet the standards or ideals that the order is currently embracing? And the answer to that will be Francesco.
So I think I'm unmuted. The short answer is that only the board of directors can take away a peerage. But the longer answer is there's sort of three aspects to this. So the first aspect would be if we had a Laurel who decided that they were going to stop practicing arts and sciences but stay active in the SCA and start pursuing some other discipline instead. And in that case, I would say they're still active in the SCA. They're still, we hope, showing their peer-like qualities. And just because they're doing some other discipline now doesn't mean that they're not still seeing things that are going on in the SCA. They can still advise the Crown. Maybe they're still teaching arts and sciences, maybe they're not, but they're still seeing what's going on. So we would still consider them a member of the order. The second thing would be maybe we elevate them and then they immediately drop out and stop playing. And that's kind of disappointing. And I would say if we start to see that as an order, if we start to see that as a pattern, like we're elevating people and then they're all dropping out right away, that would be something to take a look at as an order. Like, are we waiting too late to elevate people? And I will say that Philippe and Katerina and I were all in the society for more than 20 years by the time we were elevated, but we're all still here. And then Dorothy and Adelheid were in for around 10 years, I think, when they were elevated. And I think, personally, I think that's a more reasonable time to be looking at. But regardless, if we're starting to see that as a pattern, that would be a thing that the order should look at. But if there's a sort of a severe lack of peer-like qualities are starting to be demonstrated by the peer in question, and that's the reason why people are starting to question, why is this person still a peer? The other people in the order could maybe take that person aside and start coaching them a little bit, like, you know, hey, these things that you're doing, maybe think about how they're affecting people. But in the end, the short answer still stands: only the bod can take a peerage away.
Thank you very much. Our next question: is there any plan or way to narrow down the bands or streams of the Laurels? One topic that has come up in a few conversations is for knights and mods. They all do the same thing. And in head-to-head, they can compare skills. This is harder for Laurels, as weavers and scribes, for example, have very, very different skill sets and no objective way to compare relative skill. And we're going to hear from Sav.
Hi, I'm Leema Sav Yofreya's daughter. Sorry, I can't even pronounce my own name today. I started in the SCA 25 years ago and have been a member of the Laurel for 14 years. I was elevated for my research, I believe specifically in pre-Christian Ireland. And with regard to your question, the arts and science are so diverse. There doesn't seem to be a way of narrowing it into smaller bands or streams. In doing so, it would be so limiting. What falls within the arts and science? Everything. Think about the site for an event. It's a blank canvas. We bring everything with us to set it up. Everything at an event, the food, the smells, the music, everything you see or hear, everything that is there is because of arts and sciences. Arts and sciences have different set skills. We don't, nor can we compare weavers to scribes, to use your examples. We realize there's a diverse set of skills you're researching, and so we look at the mastery of that one thing that you're researching when we're looking at what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Continuing on with the same question will be Philippe.
Good afternoon. My name is Philippe de Saint-Denis. I joined the SCA in 1987. I was elevated 2 years ago. So like Dorothy, Mistress Dorothy, I am a baby Laurel. I was elevated for my work in persona development. And to answer your question, as far as I know, there is no plan to restrict the various streams or interests embraced by the Laurels. And I would argue that such an initiative to restrict those interests would weaken our order. We are made stronger and better to serve the Crown and the arts and sciences community by having many diverse interests and skills in which we're interested. And as for being able to assess relative skills in multiple disciplines, this is, again, another reason why we should be exploring more areas that of interest to us and not fewer. When called upon to assess one individual's work in a field with which we're not familiar, the Laurels are able to pull on a vast resource of many resources ranging from our own personal research skills, as with Mistress Sauve, Mistress Viscountess Sauve, and are out of kingdom practitioners of that art. But the more that we know here in kingdom, I think the better you as a arts and sciences community are served, and the better we are served as an order by having such a diverse pool of knowledge and interest to draw on.
Thank you very much. That actually leads into the next question very well. Because ANS is so extensive and there are so many disciplines, how is the skill measured if there are no local or even known individuals who have mastered that skills to say that one has been an expert at it? What is the bar of measurement related to skill? And the first person to discuss that will be Katerina.
Good. I'm unmuted now. So the bar of measurement, we do reach out to Laurels from other kingdoms. If we don't have a skill set amongst us to determine how well you are doing, then we absolutely will reach out to other kingdoms. Laurels will reach out to experts in their fields if we happen to know those. We also don't tend to, we also assess research. So there's so many other things that we can do a relative assessment on. So, you know, how well are you explaining what you know? How well are you able to use that in terms of education? How well is the things that you write and produce to help others learn, how is that distributed and how do people take that on? So there are a lot of other criteria that even if we don't know the exact skill set that you have, we can still do an assessment on what your expertise is in relation to the uptake and what other experts out there are saying on your skill set.
Excellent. Also to speak on this is Mistress Dorothy.
Yes, in addition to the ways in which modern technology makes it so easy for us to reach out to other Laurels in other kingdoms, to reach out to experts in universities and museums worldwide, something that is also important to remember, if your area of passion is something very unusual and very difficult to research, although you may not gain the depth of expertise in one particular uncommon area that would be compared to, for example, my expertise in the very common area of Tudor women's clothing, your impact as a teacher and as a disseminator of your skills and knowledge will be greater because you are studying in an unusual area. And so in instances like that, often your community impact is greater and you would leap ahead in the assessments for how widespread your knowledge and your research is becoming, because there are fewer voices out there teaching. That means you have a greater individual authoring as a teacher and as an expert as you're developing your skills.
Thank you. Many people start out with a basic tea tunic of broadcloth, and then over time and research, and likely some money, move on to something more authentic. Is that line for authenticity moving to being more period-based? Is that the goal? And what if that's not the goal for some people? The first to answer that will be Katerina.
So, talking about the line of research, if you come into the SCA and you want to make your attempt at pre-16th century clothing and never move from that spot, ever, that's fine. That's okay. We're okay with that. If you want to get to the point where you're wearing pretty Renaissance dresses and never move from there, perfect, that's great. If you want to be a laurel, though, we do require that you do period active arts and crafts, and that is part of, again, Kapora, and we are looking for that sort of information of how period is it, what you're doing, is the method that you use to produce it period, can you discuss your reasons for diverging from your period, the period practice. We don't want you guys to be doing something that's dangerous, you know, lead and mercury. We don't want you blowing your fingers off as part of your art. No, don't go there. But we do want you to be able to discuss, here's what they did, here's what I did, and we want you to the best of your abilities, be working with period tools and period methods when you make that, if you want to be a laurel. Sadly, what happens in this case is that often we get recommendations for wonderful artists, and they are wonderful artists that are not doing period practiced things. And so what we usually do at that point is we try to guide them and give them information about what is the medieval practice, point them in research directions that they can take their work. But ultimately, if the person doesn't want to do period work, that's okay. And we want them to enjoy their work, and we want them to do their work. The problem is we're very much defined by corpora in what we recognize as laurels. So I hope that helps clear up some of the reasons why a really good artist might not end up being a laurel.
Thank you. You had me going at the whole blowing things up. I started to get excited, and then you said that I shouldn't do that, and now I'm a little disappointed. Sav, you're the second one up to answer that question.
Yes. So when you join the SCA, all that is asked of you is to make a reasonable attempt to look medieval, period. If you want to move on to be more period-based, that's totally up to you. If not, that's cool too. Now, if a person is looking to walk the path of the laurel, then the answer changes. Yes, the goal is to see a progression of research and authenticity. We expect you to move to be more authentic for what you are wanting to have a mastery of. I also want to add, we all need to be better at supporting anyone's attempt to be more authentic or not. From the newbie to the seasoned veteran member, peer or not, everyone has variations in their authenticity, which ranges from none to very little to 100% authentic. All of those are welcome in the SCA. Thanks.
And that's part of what I love about the SCA. All of those are welcome. Thank you. That's a very good point. Is it more difficult to be recognized as a laurel if one does not live in one of the baronies? If so, what is being done to make potential laurels in outlying areas feel more encouraged and included? And the first one to answer that will be Maitre Philippe.
So statistically, it certainly would indicate that if you live in one of the smaller communities or outlying areas, that it is more difficult to be elevated to the laureate. And a lot of that also has to do with the fact that some of those smaller communities don't have an arts and sciences officer that would help to promote or foster the arts and sciences. So artisans in those communities tend to, perhaps a little more than we'd like, fall between the cracks. Then particularly when compared to their baronial counterparts. That being said, I know that there are members of our order who try their best to make an effort to visit the smaller communities and the smaller events in order to see what's happening there and try to keep a finger on the pulse and offer encouragement where we can. obviously in the winter in Avacal, travel can be a little, and you know, then there's this weird plague thing going on. But anyway, but in addition, what I want Avacal to know is that we're discussing within the Laurelet an initiative to have specific laurels maybe adopt a community in order to foster knowledge, activity, enthusiasm for the arts and sciences within those communities. And much of this can be done online, but personal visits to these smaller places would be expected. And I really would like to see that happen. It's time that we reached out to some of the smaller shires, colleges, outlying areas. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. I believe it does. Second to answer will be Sub.
Hi. It certainly does seem more difficult to be recognized as a laurel or any other peerage when you do not live in a barony. However, I from experience know that's not quite true. And nowadays, research is so much easier. Everything is online. You don't have to be close to a library for all those interlibrary loans, although they are very handy. It's way easier in these days to keep in touch with other arts and science communities throughout the known world, actually. So what can you do? You can have a social media presence. Have a blog that shows your arts and science progress pictures, a place where you collate your process notes and documentation, and the end result of each of your projects. The key is to make sure your name is recognized within the whole arts and science community. What can we as Laurels do? I know that Philippe has said a few things, but we're also offering our meet and greets, so you get used to talking to the Laurels and you know who we are. There's talk of me perhaps having more Zoom online classes to help out. You just need to be able to know that you can reach out and ask us for help and guidance at any time. And you need to know that you do not need to be in a formal relationship with a Laurel to ask for membership, any type of mentorship or any questions. You can come to us, and we are here to help and do our best to help you out.
Very good points. Thank you. For our last question for part one, how does the Order of Laurels of Avacal see themselves moving forward to promote diversity both in their order and in the kingdom? You know what? That's a doubled question. That was actually the very first question. So I'm sorry. That is actually all the questions we have for part one. Mistress Adelheid.
My apologies, scripting fail. Thank you everyone for asking questions to the Order of the Laurel, and for all of those who have taken the time to sit on our panel and answer those questions this evening. Join us tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock for our Laurels panel part 2. And yeah, we will see you all then when we get into some more questions. So have a great night, Avacal, and we'll catch you tomorrow.